A murder of a Hamas official in Dubai, a team of killers dressed in wigs and other disguises and using false passports. It's a case that has the makings of a good diplomatic row. It appears that whoever organised the assassination cloned 6 British passports to do so, only the photos had been changed. The real people, whose passport numbers were used, all live in Israel. False German and Irish passports also appear to have been forged. Well, Gordon Correra is our security correspondent. Gordon, this is a whodunit. The papers are treating it as something of a novel, but is there really any doubt that it's Mossad who would have done this?
Well, I think the view that Mossad are the most likely culprits are based on motive, removing a Hamas official, and also the relative sophistication in this in terms of using stolen identities, and of course people who lived in Israel, at least in the case of the British passport holders. So all of that has pointed towards Mossad. They also have a track record of using stolen identities and stolen passports. In 1997 they used Canadian identities. In 2004 a couple of Mossad agents we were arrested after using a very complex deception to try and gain New Zealand passports, had even set up fake travel agencies and so on to try and to get the hold of that passport. You can't entirely rule out the possibility it's a very complex framing operation with someone trying to point the finger at Mossad, but I think still the bulk of the suspicion will fall on Mossad because of the relative sophistication of this, even though there are some slightly amateurish elements.
Well, take us through what the British and the other nations' reactions will be. I mean, one's expecting outrage, but will it be real outrage or just sort of diplomatic outrage?
Well, I think the interesting thing it will be whether they can come up with enough evidence to be outraged publicly. Clearly already, having spoken to people, there is a lot of concern behind the scenes at what appears to have happened. But they, of course, will have to come up with some pretty hard evidence that it certainly was Mossad, who, of course, will deny it, as they always do with their operations. So it will be quite interesting to see whether they either can come up with hard evidence or whether they still want to go for full diplomatic outrage over this, because there is certainly a large degree of anger over the potential use of British identities and having those identities stolen.
Gordon, thank you very much. Well, Dr Ronen Bergman is author of The Secret War with Iran and is a senior security and intelligence correspondent and analyst for Israel's largest daily newspaper. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a rather unusual operation to have seen. It's rather unusual to see an operation of this kind exposed so much, as perhaps the Dubai authorities have succeeded in telling us so much of what's gone on. This would have taken, if it was Mossad who did it, it would take them by surprise and presumably be quite annoying to them, would it?
Well, I don't know if it was Mossad, and even if I knew, I couldn't tell you. But I would say this. We are witnessing, in the history of intelligence, we're witnessing the end of an era. This is an era where traceless assassination could not be performed anymore, or with a very small number of these. If the person who authorized this assassination, who sent the perpetrators, knew in advance about this, I would say, surprising and magnificent ability of the Dubai police to corroborate information from 8 different visual sources and one signal intelligence, these are the cell phones, put them all on one timeline, one database, and came to the conclusions which they came. If this person who authorized the operation knew in advance that this is going to happen, and he's jeopardizing the false identities and the photographs of 11 or 12 perpetrators that are going to be burned afterwards, and he made a decision that it's worthwhile to send al-Mabhouh, the senior Hamas operative, to the next world, one-way ticket, in return for these identities, then this is a successful operation. I mean, he's dead and they are out of the country, and the Dubai police is chasing the wind. They will never be able to catch them. No. However, if this surprised anyone who sent them, then this is at least a partial failure from 3 angles. First, there is a diplomatic and international turmoil, and the countries of the original passports were issued are furious. Second, there are face recognition systems in the world that are able to absorb the photographs and might flag these people who are going to be in a sort of house arrest in their homeland. And third, anyone who is now considering using the weapon of assassination, I'm not going into the ethical or judicial debate, but anyone who is thinking about this, would reconsider regarding the consequences of this assassination.
Just very, very briefly, why do they use real people's passports rather than just making some passports up?
It's much easier to use the real people because if you made a person up from scratch, then you need to feed his identities into the computers and records of the origin country, and this is very,
and
very
that's complicated.
hard. Once you have someone existing, then you only need to change the photograph.
Ronen Bergman, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's briefly talk to Rosemary Hollis, who's a Middle East expert at City University London, is with us in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Rosemary. Let's, for sake of argument, assume it's Mossad at the moment, which is an assumption many are making. What would it entail Israel as saying by taking out this Hamas guy in Dubai? What's going on?
Well, as we've already heard, it is a pattern of behaviour that Israel has adopted over the years. They think that their enemies are best dealt with in part by decapitation, assassinating the leaders, be it of the PLO in the old days and now of Hamas. Also, war is on the horizon, or renewed war is on the horizon between Israel and the Hamas leadership in Gaza.
Right. This is what I was getting at. Do you think it could be a sort of Israel getting worried again about the way this relationship's going?
I don't think they've ever stopped being worried. Right. And the other thing that they've been flagging up for at least 3 years now, but certainly with intensification these last several months, is Iran and the danger that Iran, especially if it goes nuclear in weapon terms, poses to Israel. And there's much emphasis on the fact that this man, al-Mabhouh, had previously kidnapped and assassinated 2 Israeli soldiers way back. He left Gaza, he ran from the occupied territories in order to save his own skin after that episode, but since then has still been working for Hamas and allegedly in connection with arms supplies to the Gaza Strip.
From Iran, or funded by Iran perhaps, or
and
alleged.
Israel accuses Iran of being the main supplier of the arms and the money.
Very, very briefly, the British will be outraged because they used our passport, so to speak. What do the Americans think of these Israeli operations? Do they think this is actually probably a rather efficient way of going about things, or best to turn a blind eye to it?
There's a debate about whether it's a good idea to assassinate the leaders of your enemy, because they've always got family. You might kill other casualties on the way, civilians. It's a moot point, and whether they will reinvent themselves, they always have so far. The other thing is that in Dubai, intelligence cooperation is vitally important to the US, the UK, the Western operation against any kind of terrorism, and this may have cut across the lines of trust and cooperation.
Getting very complicated. Rosemary Hollis, thank you very much indeed.